So now that you have cut your textile pieces here, we are moving to the next stage.
And for this vessel, that stage is gilding them.
Oh, okay.
And in a very free-form way. I'm not a professional gilder. And you can gild on fabric using different media, but for this instance, I'm just using PVA. It works really well. But it does take a little while to set again, so I'm just going to glue the areas. I've just got it on my workbench. Glue the areas where I want the gold leaf to go, which is the top, in quite a formal way, and then the bottom bit is a bit more random. Just make sure you've got enough glue, otherwise it won't stick. You kind of have to wait for it to dry a bit, but my process here is going to be slightly different. I'm just going to be a bit more random about the bottoms. You can kind of put it.
So now that it is kind of dried,
it's a bit tacky.
So what I do is just
put them on there, but because this is quite see-through fabric, if I'm not careful, it's just going to stick to the table there. So I just turn it over. It's just come off already. And put it around the other way, and then it's going to dry easier. Got to make sure I don't stick on the table. Doesn't have to be accurate. What you have to make sure is that you've stuck it down.
Okay.
Okay, so I've let the PVA dry, and now you can take the backing off of the gold leaf. As I say, it's really free form. You can just use your fingernails.
Do you need to add something on top to secure it, or it's just
no? I haven't. I mean, it's I mean, these vessels are inherently fragile anyway, so you have to look after them, and I think that's part of it. Is that fragility of just because something's fragile doesn't mean to say it's not worth looking after, and you'd spend a bit more time looking after it, don't you? Make sure it's safe. It's like keeping memories safe. And that, the other thing about vessels is that you can, they are vessels of memories, so you can see it in that way. Very random, these bottom bits. I like it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Ready to sew. The next bit of the process is to start sewing them together. And for these, this vessel, I've chosen to use lurex, which I don't use all the time. It just seemed right. And one of the memories that Lucia had about her grandmother was that when she taught her to sew, she said how important it was that the back was as tidy as the front. So I've chosen a zigzag stitch, that's really neat inside. It doesn't look exactly the same as the front, but it's a really neat stitch. So that's why I've chosen the stitch, and I've chosen the gold leaf to decorate it because the grandmothers, both grandmothers seemed very glamorous. Gold is kind of always associated with Greece, so I just thought it was appropriate.
So would you like to talk to us about your grandmother?
Yes, so these vessels are very different from the one I made for my grandmother's, one of whom I didn't really know that well. She died when I was quite young. She was my father's mother, Ada. And she had a bit of a tough life. She was a domestic help, and I know she struggled in the First World War trying to feed her children while her husband was away. And they lived in the south of London, and her husband was a mechanic who didn't earn much money. The biggest influence on my life was my grandmother, who was Dorothy Alice, and her son Bernard, who lived with her all his life, didn't ever leave home, called her Alice. I don't really know why. But her husband died when I was quite young too, and she said he was always quite damaged by fighting in the First World War. But my grandmother just lived up the road while I grew up, so we could just walk up there and see her, and she would sit with us, me and my sister, and show us how to knit. She taught us how to knit, how to crochet. And she was part of the WI in the village, and they had a craft group, and they learnt new skills, new techniques every now and again. And I know she worked with leather one time. She did lots of kind of embroidery techniques, and then she learnt how to tat. Did tatting, which is using a little shuttle, a bit like crochet, but more delicate. And she taught me how to do that and make peppermint creams at Christmas. She was a very nice lady. You've sewn 7 pieces together. It's a question of joining them up to make the vessel shape. So I've now got all the 7 pieces joined together, and this is the tricky bit, putting them all together to make the vessel shape, because you're kind of working inside. So like all the other bits, it's threading the needle, making a knot. Tie it twice. This is lurex. This is quite tricky to work with. Nice knot. So work from the bottom up as I did before, overlapping. This is the peaceful part of the process. And just sit and sew.
You're using a golden thread.
Yes, lurex. Don't know what it's made from. It's shiny though. So join all the 7 together, but it's really important for me to have a base, because if it doesn't have a base, it's not a vessel, and then it's not finished. So you have to kind of work out how big the circle is. That looks a bit big, but I'm going to cut that. Better to have it too big than too small. So I've left all the little threads on the top just free, because it's not, it kind of says about the vivacity of the characters that based it on. I think these are all quite strong women, all quite lively. So that looks about the right size. So now I've got to sew it on. Just finishing off joining the bottom, which is really tricky. The trickiest bit. Just have to be really careful. Work quite delicately. I mean, it will get a bit deformed, but you just pull it out. Ooh. Just pulling it out so that I can see what I'm doing. Last stitch.
The last stitch, I like that as an expression.
Yeah. So now it's just a question of hiding the end. So it's secure. Sew it in a couple of times.